Was there a period in your life where you really wanted to understand story, and so you just started consuming all types of films?
I mean, it wasn't because I wanted to understand stories, just I was interested in movies. Like, I wanted to just watch movies, you know? It wasn't necessarily because I'm like, oh, I need to figure out how they tell them. I mean, I grew up in an area where there's not film culture necessarily, and it was pre-digital revolution. The internet existed, but I didn't have the internet at the time.
You grew up on a farm?
I grew up on a farm, and so I do remember at some point there was I was more interested in like screenplay structure, or even screenplay format, because I had, you know, as a teenager, I bought a couple of scripts from like it wasn't Barnes and Noble, would we have like Borders? I don't know, one of those bookstores in the mall. And the structure of them, like, what is this interior, you know, what is this slug line? Why are they written this way? And like to figure out, you know, I'd written short stories or whatever, but to figure out like, how do you write this? What does this look like physically? What does this look like? And so I remember transcribing, like I had a videotape of an episode of Homicide: Life on the Street. Do you remember that television show?
I do, yeah.
Which I loved. And I just took one of the shows, you know, now I could just Google it and probably find the PDF of the teleplay somewhere. But I just took that show, this episode that I love so much, and I transcribed the whole thing, which meant I was stopping and rewinding and you know, to get all the dialogue and just sort of, okay, what does this look like when you actually write it? Like, okay, so this, and you could see, or I could see, oh, okay, so lines of dialogue, which is, you know, kind of something that we teach now, but I needed to see it because I hadn't taken any screenwriting classes or anything at that point. Oh, lines of dialogue. There's no like block speeches like this. Like the lines of dialogue are 4 or 5 words, sometimes less, often less. And they'll speak this much, and then we go into a new scene. It was just useful to me to try to figure out. I mean, long after that, I'm still trying to figure out how to write a script. But like physically, I needed to physically see it. There was something about physically seeing it and how it looked on a page, because it's not something that I grew up looking at or reading, right? When you read a story, when you read a novel, when you read a short story, it doesn't look like a screenplay. I need to figure out what they look like. But then just, I watched movies. I watched movies because they were interesting. The way that a movie can get you inside of a story and get you inside of a perspective. That was what was interesting to me. Yeah, figuring out how to tell them. Yeah, absolutely. Like I'm always interested in that now. And as I've, you know, started going when I went to film school and all that sort of stuff. But I don't ever remember thinking like, this is going to teach me how to tell a story. Maybe I did. I don't know, but I don't remember it if I did.
Did you have plans to study film? I mean, growing up, you grew up in like Central California?
I grew up in Central California. It was a discovery I made as a teenager that, I'm interested in this. Like from not having a social life and just watching lots of movies. And I grew up in a pretty religious household, and we actually didn't have a VCR. And you know, I'm a child of the '80s. I think you said you're Generation X. I'm Gen X, just like you. And so watching videos on at home on your VCR was a big way of consuming movies for our generation, and I didn't have that available to me. But what we would do is, my mother, if we had like she has 3 sons, none of whom want to get up earlier than 11 a.m. on the weekend. But she would give us like, you know, if we do this big chore, like wash all the windows around the house, we could then go to the video store and we could rent a bunch of movies, and also we would rent a VCR because we didn't have one. And so this would be an opportunity for me and my brothers to just rent a bunch of stuff that we had wanted to see but hadn't had the opportunity. And so that really sort of sparked something, because it it's not just the movies themselves, but this pleasure, this thing that it was not available to me. But then we would have these kind of days of ecstasy where we got to see a bunch of stuff. So I'll never forget, like, Die Hard, when I rented Die Hard. I watched that thing in the course of a 24-hour period. I must have watched it 4 times. You know, I was watching it because I'm the youngest, and so I went last. You know, my brothers got their picks and they watched their films, so I'm staying up till 1 or 2 in the morning to watch Die Hard. And then I think I woke up early the next day at 8 a.m. or whatever to watch it again. And I still love that movie to this day. It's a masterpiece. So that sparked something, that kind of experience. And then just being an awkward teenager and not having much of a social life, most of my Friday nights were spent, after we did finally get a VCR, most of my Friday and Saturday nights were spent renting stuff, you know. I grew up in a small town, so like the movies that I started to get interested in as a teenager, they didn't come to our theaters. So if I was going to see, you know, Reservoir Dogs or something like that, it was going to be on video. It was not going to be at the local theater. Although that was like, as I'm sort of growing into this as a focal interest and trying to get my friends interested in it, and they were not. I mean, they liked going to the movies, but they didn't want to necessarily make movies, and they definitely didn't want to see these like arty, the arty films that I was into. So I'll never forget, like, they forced me to go see Independence Day, which I did not want to see, and I hated. And then I forced them to go see Leaving Las Vegas, which they all hated.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, Leaving Las Vegas did come, which is surprising now that I think about it. But it was Oscar nominated. That's probably why, or Academy Award nominated. That's probably why it came. But so yeah, it's that. It's that thing that was unavailable to me that sparked something, and then I just became really interested in it. And as a way, I would say, if I'm gonna sort of be my own therapist, as a way of cementing a kind of iconoclasm, this desire to be different from my peers. Oh, they like Independence Day. I'm not gonna be like them. I'm gonna like Sex, Lies, and Videotape. That's going to be my kind of film, you know. I got more and more drawn to art cinema, independent cinema, and from that to European cinema, Asian cinema, that sort of stuff.